What happens when someone reveals a truth they've hidden for 40 years on live television and everyone falls completely silent? Stop the tape. Stop everything. Right now. Dr. Phil's hand shot up, freezing every camera operator mid-shot. The studio went from controlled chaos to absolute silence in 3 seconds. A 73-year-old grandmother named Margaret sat in the guest chair, tears streaming down her face, holding an envelope she'd kept hidden since 1965. What she was about to reveal would shatter her family's understanding of their entire history. 2 hours earlier, Margaret had walked into the Dr. Phil studio believing she was there to discuss family communication issues. Her daughter Sarah had submitted the application months ago, complaining that her mother was too secretive and never shared anything about her past. Margaret arrived wearing a floral dress, her white hair perfectly styled, hands trembling slightly as production assistants clipped a microphone to her collar. In her purse, wrapped in tissue paper, was a yellowed envelope she'd carried with her for 4 decades. The show had started normally. Dr. Phil welcomed the audience, introduced Margaret and her daughter Sarah, and began with his typical warm-up questions. So Margaret, your daughter says you never talk about your youth. Why is that? Margaret smiled politely, the way she'd smiled through 50 years of dinners, holidays, and family gatherings where no one knew the truth. Some things are private, Dr. Phil. Not everything needs to be shared. But Dr. Phil had already noticed something in Margaret's eyes, a weight that went deeper than simple privacy. Margaret, I've been doing this a long time. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his voice softer now. And I can tell when someone isn't just being private. They're protecting something. What are you protecting? The question hung in the air. Margaret's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. In the audience, her daughter Sarah watched intently, thinking this was about some minor family drama from decades ago. Margaret's voice cracked. She reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope. I've never told anyone this. Not my husband. Not my children. No one. Dr. Phil's expression changed immediately. He sat up straighter, his producer instincts recognizing that something significant was about to happen. Margaret, before you say anything, I need you to know that whatever you're about to share, we can stop the cameras if you need to. This is your choice. But Margaret had already made her choice. After 40 years, the truth was coming out. In 1965, when I was 16 years old, I got married. The words came out in a rush, decades of silence breaking all at once. His name was James. We were in love. We got married at a courthouse in Nevada without telling anyone. Sarah's gasp was audible even from the audience. Mom, what are you talking about? Margaret continued, her voice steadier now, as if speaking the words aloud was releasing something that had been compressed inside her for half a century. My parents found out 3 months later. They had the marriage annulled. They sent me away to my aunt's house in Oregon. When I came back 6 months later, I was told to never speak of it again. Dr. Phil's hand went up. Stop the tape. The studio froze. Cameras stopped moving. Producers in the control room held their breath. Dr. Phil stood up and walked over to Margaret's chair. He knelt down beside her, speaking quietly enough that the microphones barely picked it up. Margaret, what you just shared, that took incredible courage. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is there more to this story? Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. James and I, before the annulment, I got pregnant. The revelation hit the studio like a shockwave. Sarah stood up from her seat in the audience, her hands over her mouth. Dr. Phil remained kneeling beside Margaret, his professional composure never wavering, but his eyes showed the weight of what he was hearing. Margaret, Dr. Phil's voice was gentle but firm. Where is that child now? Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Margaret pulled a photograph from the envelope. Her hands shook as she held it up. I gave birth to a baby girl in May 1966. My parents arranged for a closed adoption. I never got to hold her. I never got to name her. For 58 years, I've lived knowing I have a daughter somewhere in the world, and I don't even know her name. Dr. Phil took the photograph gently from Margaret's hands. It showed a hospital nursery bracelet with only Baby Girl May 14, 1966 written on it. He turned to the control room. Mike, I need you to clear the stage. Family members only. Everyone else, please step back. Production scrambled to comply. The audience was asked to remain seated but quiet. Sarah climbed over seats to reach her mother, her face a mixture of shock, confusion, and something else, understanding, perhaps, of why her mother had always seemed to carry a sadness no one could name. Dr. Phil pulled a chair close to Margaret and Sarah. Margaret, why are you sharing this now? After all these years, why today? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Because I'm 73 years old. Because I wake up every morning wondering if my daughter is alive, if she's happy, if she ever thinks about the mother who gave her away. Because Sarah deserves to know she has a sister somewhere. Because I'm tired of living with this secret. But what no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming was what Dr. Phil said next. Margaret, when your daughter Sarah applied to be on this show, our team does background research. We verify information, check records, make sure we understand the full story before anyone comes on stage. He paused, pulling something from his jacket pocket. 3 weeks ago, we located adoption records from Oregon in 1966. The envelope Dr. Phil held wasn't yellowed like Margaret's. It was crisp, white, official-looking. Margaret, we found your daughter. The words seemed to suspend time itself. Margaret's mouth opened but no sound came out. Sarah grabbed her mother's hand. The entire studio held its collective breath. Her name is Jennifer. She's 58 years old. She lives in Portland. She's been searching for you for 20 years. Dr. Phil opened the envelope, showing Margaret a photograph of a woman with Margaret's eyes and smile. And she's here. She's backstage right now. Margaret's hands flew to her face. No. No, that's not possible. How could you? How did you? Margaret. Dr. Phil's voice was steady, the voice of someone who had guided hundreds of families through impossible moments. Jennifer filled out DNA registry forms 15 years ago, hoping to find you. When our team found the adoption records, we cross-referenced them with genetic databases. We found her. And we asked if she wanted to meet you. She said yes. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He stood up and walked toward the stage entrance. The camera operators, trained to follow him, started to move. He held up his hand again. No cameras past this point. This moment is theirs, not ours. Dr. Phil disappeared backstage. Through the studio monitors, the audience could see what was happening in the green room. A woman, Jennifer, stood there, her hands clasped together, tears already streaming down her face. Dr. Phil spoke to her quietly, then gestured toward the stage. Jennifer walked slowly into the studio. The audience saw her first, a woman in her late 50s with Margaret's bone structure, her grandmother's hands, her mother's nervous smile. Sarah saw her second and gasped, seeing the family resemblance immediately. Margaret saw her last. She stood up from her chair, one hand gripping the armrest for support, the other pressed against her heart. Mom? Jennifer's voice broke on the word. It was the first time in 58 years that Margaret had heard someone call her that. The studio went completely silent. Margaret took 3 steps forward. Jennifer took 3 steps forward. They met in the middle of the stage, and when they embraced, decades of separation collapsed into a single moment of reunion. Dr. Phil stood off to the side, his expression showing the weight of what was happening. This wasn't television anymore. This was restoration. The audience erupted into applause through tears, collective catharsis. Sarah joined her mother and sister, creating a circle of 3 generations finally united. But what happened next is something no one in the room saw coming. Dr. Phil walked back with another person. An elderly man, late 70s, leaning on a cane. Margaret. Dr. Phil's voice was gentle. There's someone else who wanted to be here today. Margaret looked up. Her eyes widened. James? The man nodded. Hello, Maggie. It was the name no one had called her in 58 years. The name from before the annulment, before the separation, before the decades of silence. We found James 6 days ago, Dr. Phil explained. He's been looking for you too. He never stopped. When the annulment happened, he tried to fight it. When he found out about the pregnancy, he tried to find you. Your parents blocked every attempt. But he never forgot. James moved closer, his steps careful but determined. I married someone else eventually. Had kids, grandkids. But I never stopped wondering about you. About our daughter. Jennifer looked between her biological parents, two people who had loved each other as teenagers, been torn apart by circumstance, and now stood facing each other for the first time in nearly 6 decades. I'm sorry, James said, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I couldn't fight harder. Margaret shook her head. You were 17. We were children. It wasn't your fault. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil guided them all to sit down, Margaret, Jennifer, Sarah, and James. The 4 of them formed an unlikely constellation, the teenage lovers separated by time, the daughter given away, the daughter who grew up never knowing. Jennifer. Dr. Phil asked gently. What do you want to say to your mother? Jennifer took Margaret's hands in hers. I want to say that I understand. I want to say that I had a good life. My adoptive parents loved me. They told me I was adopted when I was 8. They told me that my birth mother was young and made a brave choice. They told me that if I ever wanted to find you, they would help me. So I did. I looked. For 20 years I looked. She pulled out her own envelope. Inside was a letter, worn from being unfolded and refolded hundreds of times. I wrote this 10 years ago, Jennifer said. I've carried it with me, hoping I'd get to give it to you someday. Margaret took the letter with shaking hands and read aloud. Dear Mom, I don't know if I'll ever find you. I don't know if you think about me. I don't know if you remember the daughter you gave away. But I want you to know that I'm okay. I'm happy. I have a family. I have a life. And I forgive you. I've always forgiven you. Because I became a mother too, and I know what it means to love your child more than yourself. I know you gave me away because you thought it was best. I know you've carried this pain your whole life. I want you to know you can let it go now. You can stop hurting. Because I'm right here. I always have been. I was just waiting for you to find me. With love, your daughter. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Margaret folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. I thought about you every single day. Every birthday, I wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. Every Mother's Day, I grieved for the child I never got to mother. Every Christmas, I wondered what you looked like, what your voice sounded like, what your favorite things were. Jennifer smiled through tears. I love old movies. I love gardening. I love Frank Sinatra. I cry at commercials. Margaret laughed, a sound of joy and recognition. So do I. All of those things. That's extraordinary. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Margaret, you've carried this secret for 58 years. You've lived with this grief, this wondering, this guilt. What does it feel like to finally let it go? Margaret looked at Jennifer, then at Sarah, then at James. It feels like I can breathe. It feels like I've been holding my breath since 1966, and I can finally exhale. The moment Dr. Phil had engineered wasn't just about revelation, it was about restoration. He turned to the audience, many of whom were openly weeping. What we're witnessing here is what happens when secrets are finally released. Margaret has lived her entire adult life carrying the weight of this hidden truth. It shaped how she parented Sarah. It shaped how she loved her husband. It shaped every relationship she had because she couldn't be fully present when part of her was always somewhere else, wondering about the daughter she'd lost. He looked back at Margaret. But today, that changes. Today, you get to start a new chapter. You get to know your daughter. You get to be her mother, even if it's 58 years late. The production team, who had seen thousands of episodes, stood in the wings with tears streaming down their faces. This was why they did this work. This was the moment that justified all the preparation, all the research, all the careful coordination. Dr. Phil made one final gesture. He pulled out a small velvet box with 2 identical silver bracelets, each engraved. Found, November 2024. These are for you, he said, handing one to Margaret and one to Jennifer. So you never forget the day you found each other again. They put the bracelets on, their hands trembling. Sarah clasped both of their hands, completing the circle. James stood witnessing the reunion. Dr. Phil turned to him. James, what do you need to say? I need to say that I loved you, Maggie. I loved you then, and I never stopped. And to our daughter, Jennifer, I wish I could have been there. But I'm grateful I get to meet you now. Jennifer embraced her biological father for the first time. 2 strangers connected by DNA and lost time, finding in each other a missing piece. The epilogue to this story unfolded over the following months. Dr. Phil's team arranged family counseling for Margaret and Jennifer, helping them build a relationship 58 years late. Jennifer connected with her half-siblings from James's other marriage. Sarah gained a sister. James spent his remaining years knowing the daughter he thought he'd lost forever. The envelope Margaret had carried for 4 decades found a new home in a family album with pictures of 3 generations finally united. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history and sparked thousands of families to share their own hidden truths and begin their own journeys of reunion and healing. In the end, Margaret's courage to speak a truth she'd hidden for 58 years did more than reunite one family. It gave permission to countless others to stop hiding and start healing. Dr. Phil reflected months later. Margaret's story reminded me why we do this. It's about giving people permission to be honest, to release the secrets that are slowly killing them. Margaret lived 58 years believing she had to carry that pain alone. The day she decided to speak it out loud was the day she started living again. The silver bracelets, found November 2024, became symbols of courage, of truth-telling, of the belief that it's never too late to heal. And every time Margaret looked at hers, she remembered that the secret she thought would destroy her family actually became the key that unlocked a future she'd never dared to imagine.